A Dragonlance media production.
Hey everyone, this is Hugh from Plaguelands Media bringing you another book review. Now, you know I love fantasy, you know I love fantasy art. I've done a few art book reviews in the past. Today I'm looking at Masters of Dragonlance art. Now this is the second Dragonlance art book that I'm aware of. The first one I believe was called The Art of Dragonlance, and the cover had the fantastic flying citadel on it. This showcases some of the more, well, I'm not going to say modern, but the later book covers from the Dragonlance setting, as well as showcasing some of the earlier artists as well. So, you know what? Let's just get right into the next episode of...
Read a fucking book. 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 People.
So this is Masters of Dragonlance art. Now, I absolutely adore this book. I think it's fantastic because not only does it showcase the art of the Dragonlance setting, which is wild and varied, but it also gives you kind of biographies on the artists and their impressions on their own paintings. So let's get straight into this. So we have a foreword written by Margaret Weiss, who was the co-author of the original Chronicles and Legends, and second generation Dragons of Summer Flame, and some subsequent trilogies, as well as the latest trilogy that has just come out. So we start with Matt Stawicki, and he kind of redid the covers for the original Dragonlance Chronicles. These aren't the covers that I grew up with or that I remember. So here we have Dragons of Autumn Twilight. You can see the town of Solace in the background, which those of you that have read Dragonlance know that Solace is a treetop town, or was before the dragon armies invaded, and the Valenwood trees with the houses, the Inn of the Last Home. And then we have three of the main characters, Flint Fireforge, Tanis Half-Elven, and of course Gold Moon holding the blue crystal staff, which those of you that know the stories know that Riverwind found in the ruins of Zakzaroth. I'm getting ahead of myself here. We then have Dragons of Winter Night. And in the little blurb here, the artist says that they were very specific as to what the design of the architecture here should look like, because it is the High Claris Tower, so they gave him a copy of the Dragonlance Atlas in order to kind of get a feel for the architecture there. Of course, we have the blue dragons. We have Tasselhoff Burfoot. I believe this is Lorana, the Golden General, and Sturm Brightblade. And finally, we have Dragons of Spring Dawning. Beautiful green colors. Raceland Magier, Caraman Magier, Kitiara Uthmeta, who is their half-sister, in the background. And if you read this, the artist tells you that these two were done from actual life models, and Kitiara was from a series of sketches, which I thought was very fascinating. We then move into Dragonlance Legends, the trilogy that came next. We have Time of the Twins. We see Raceland, Caramon, and Chrysania, the cleric of Paladine. And in the background, we see the city of Istar at the time of the cataclysm where the gods are going to destroy it. This was a great trilogy that had like time travel elements to it, but it was really a lot of fun. And I highly recommend, if you go and read Chronicles, definitely read Legends as well. So Time of the Twins moves into War of the Twins, where you can see Tasselhoff Barefoot and Caramon. And then we have Test of the Twins, where we have Caramon, Raceland, and Chrysania in front of the dragon portal. You can see Tarkesis, the Queen of Darkness, there in the background. Now, if you read what the artist says about these three paintings, the focus is heavily on architecture. So if you can see like the architecture of Istar, the architecture here, and then the architecture of the dragon portal and the inner kind of sanctuary, which I thought was very fascinating. Then we have the War of Souls. Now, the War of Souls came kind of much later. You had second generation, Dragons of Summer Flame, and then the War of Souls. So we have Dragons of a Fallen Sun, which was the first one, which introduced this character, whose name escapes me at the moment, but she is a key player in this trilogy and another trilogy going forward. And then we have Dragons of a Lost Star and Dragons of a Vanished Moon. Now, what is interesting is that the color palette for these three covers matches the color palette for Dragons of Autumn Twilight, which has like the red and oranges, Dragons of Winter Night, which has the blues, and Dragons of Spring Dawning, which has the greens. The blurb here also describes how this was originally painted as a human skull, and then he was told it had to be a dragon skull, so he had to change the composition of it, which I thought was pretty cool. Now we go into the Age of Mortals. I never really got into the Age of Mortals books or even the redone Dungeons & Dragons game version of Age of Mortals. But you can see like a very distinctive style here. Here we have Dragons of Summer Flame. Here we have the second generation. Second generation was really good because it passed the torch from the main heroes onto basically their children, primarily the children of Caramon Maegir and Tika Maegir. Tika, of course, being the barmaid in Dragons of Autumn Twilight, who goes on to be Caramon's wife and whatnot. And Dragons of Summer Flame killed off some of the main characters, which I thought was a very interesting thing to do. Okay, we move on to Mark Zug. And we can see here the book covers. These are things that I've never seen or read before. Thieves Guild, Dragon Isles. Brom is a very interesting artist. Brom did a lot of art for Dark Sun, and I'm actually quite familiar with his work. I love his Dark Sun stuff. Very, very evocative. So this is the cover to the novel Firstborn, which is book one of the Elven Nations trilogy. The Elven Nations trilogy is about the way that the Sylvanesti elves, kind of two brothers, fight, and one of them goes off and has his own kind of nation of elves called the Qualinesti. So you now have the Sylvanesti and the Qualinesti. But then there's also the Wild Elves, which are the Kaganesti. And then you've got the Sea Elf factions, which are the Dimonesti and the Darganesti. So But yeah, this is a really cool trilogy of books. So you have some here. This is a wild elf, otherwise known as the Kaganesti in Dragonlance lore. We have a minotaur from the continent of Taladas here, and the comment is about the mists and the standing stones. We have Daniel Horn. This is the cover to the book Brothers in Arms, a book that focuses heavily on Caramon and Raistlin, because in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to Dragonlance, they are the most popular characters of the original Dragonlance. I believe in the Chronicles, Raistlin has the best character arc, and then in Legends, Caramon has the best character arc. But, you know, there are so many of these characters that it just doesn't matter. And then we have, like, Kitty Ara down there. Draconian Measures. There are 2 alternate covers to that. Okay, Seeds of Chaos. Tears of the Night Sky. I do have this novel. I've never read any of these kind of books before, because basically they came out at a time when I was finding Dragonlance to be a little bit boring. It had gone kind of off of what I was used to or what I enjoyed. So I stopped reading it, but then a friend was selling a collection of Dragonlance novels, picked it up, and have Tears of the Night Sky. We have Chrysania here. She, at this point, has become blind, and she has this white tiger that kind of guides her around. Really cool. We go on to Todd Lockwood. So we have Chaos Spawn, The Wayward Knights. Never read that series either. Any of the, like the Salamnian, Lord of the Rose, Wayward Knights, any of those books. From the Dragonlance calendar. The Last Thane. This is in the same series as Tears of the Night Sky. I love the comment here. I wanted a dwarf who looked like he could kick your ass. Pretty sure he achieved that with that picture there. Then we have the Annotated Chronicles. So this was released with notes from the authors. I never had it. I never read it. Always thought it was a very cool idea. But again, who do you see? Caramon, Raistlin, Gold Dragon. Of course, this was a cover for Dragon magazine. Now we're getting into the old school artists. These are the artists that I kind of grew up with their book covers in high school, maybe late elementary school, high school, and into early university. Early first university, I should say. I really like Clyde Caldwell as an artist. So here we have Flint the King. This is the cover for one of the Prelude novels. So basically, authors were given free rein to write what they called like the Preludes or the Meeting Sextet, where we find out not only how the heroes from Chronicles met, but also at the beginning of Chronicles, we're told that they all made a pact that they would leave for 5 years and find out what the fuck was going on and then return 5 years later. And so we get the stories of what happened to those characters in the 5 years. So Flint the King is what happened to Flint in the 5 years, and the reason why he hates gully dwarves, which is an offshoot of dwarves that are like gutter dwarves, so to speak. So we find out what happened there. This is Kindred Spirits, how Flint met Tanis Half-Elven. This is Steel and Stone, the romance blossoming between Tanis Half-Elven and Kitiara Uthmata. This is Darkheart. So this includes, I believe, Sturm Brightblade. Then we have Riverwind the Plainsman, which is one of my all-time favorite Dragonlance novels. How Riverwind is banished from the village until he finds some proof of the true gods. And in delirium, he makes his way to Zakzaroth, which is this kind of ruined underground city that is held by a black dragon, who he manages to get the blue crystal staff and bring it back to the village, and so on and so forth. Just a fantastic novel. Really a lot of fun. The Oath and the Measure. Again, we're dealing with Sturm Brightblade, because the Oath and the Measure is what the Knights of Solamnia talk about. Jeff Easley. Oh, this. Yeah, that cover. Behind the Mask. So, in Dragonlance Chronicles, the main villain of Dragon's Autumn Twilight is the High Lord of the Red Dragon Army, High Lord Verminard. This book, the first book in the Villains series, is how he becomes a Dragon High Lord. His fall from grace, so to speak. It is freaking awesome. Then we have, what is this called? Let me just lean in. Barham's Guide to the War of Souls, Volume 1. Never heard of it, but cool cover. Just push that over a little bit. Okay. Kaz the Minotaur. This was the cover for... So, they had a series called Dragonlance Heroes, which started with Legend of Humor by Richard A. Knack, I believe, which told the story of Humor Dragonbane, the Knight of Solamnia that first discovered the Dragonlancers, and in the first Great Dragon War, fought Tarkesis and forced her back into the portal. Now, what's interesting about Humor Dragonbane is that he befriended not only a wizard of high sorcery called Magius, whose name is given to the Staff of Magius, which Raistlin is given at the end of his test in the Tower of High Sorcery, but I'm getting beside myself. But he befriends a Minotaur called Kaz. And so in the second trilogy, Heroes Volume 2, there is a novel, Kaz the Minotaur, which describes what Kaz has been doing after the events of Humor's death in the Legend of Humor. So that is the cover there, which is really cool. We have some fantastic art here. The Dark Queen. This is Tarkesis. She has the 5 metallic dragons. Chromatic dragons. White, blue, red, green, and black. Behind her, The Gates of Thebarden. This was another Heroes novel, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Emperor of Ancelon. So that is probably Lord Ariacus. Knight of the Sword. Marquesta Carthon. This was Heroes Volume 2. Now, I might be mistaken in my lore, and please, in the comments, tell me if I am. But I believe Marquesta Carthon was the ship's captain who took Tanis and a few of the other heroes into the Maelstrom, where they were met with the Sea Elves during the Chronicles trilogy. But I could be wrong on that. Anyway, she's a pirate in the series. Okay, Theros Ironfeld. Theros was the blacksmith in Solus who lost his arm during the invasion by the dragon armies, but the heroes found the silver arm of Urgoth, and using the silver arm of Urgoth, it allowed him to forge new dragon lances. I do have the novel which I plan to read and review very soon because I'm very interested in his backstory. He's a little bit of a throwaway character in the trilogy, but he plays a very important role. The Eve of the Maelstrom. Oh, now we have Larry Elmore. Possibly one of my, if not my favorite fantasy artist of all time. And I only say that because of the art he did for the Dragonlance series. That doesn't disparage any other fantasy artists out there. I know there are some fantastic ones like Frank Frazetta, but I just absolutely love Larry Elmore's art. And it is primarily because of book covers of books I read as a kid. So there's a nostalgia there. Dragon Dawn. The Dragons of Krynn. We have looks like a silver dragon fighting a red dragon. The Urda. The Urda are high ogres, I guess, you could say. And they play a part, a bigger part in Dragons of Summer Flame, but there's also a story called Raceland's Daughter in, I believe it's book 3 of the short story trilogy. I believe it's called Love and War. And there's a story called Raceland's Daughter, and it turns out that I think she's an Urda, but I'm not too sure. It's been a long, long time since I read it. Weasel's Luck was, I believe, book 3 in the original Heroes trilogy, which the character of Weasel, I didn't really enjoy the book so much, but I do like the character that went on to play a role in Galen Benighted, and then in a short story that I reviewed in the Dragons of Krynn anthology. The Soul Forge. This was fucking amazing. This book is fucking amazing. And it basically tells the story of a child, Raceland Magier, and how he becomes a wizard of high sorcery. Really, really great book. I absolutely enjoyed it. Raceland's Daughter. There you go. Okay, the seventh. What is that? Seventh Sentinel. I believe this was a trilogy focused on the moons of magic. In Dragonlance there are 3 moons of magic. There's Lutenary, Solinary is the white, Lutenary is the red, and Nuitary is the black. And your magic, if you're a white robe, red robe, or black robe mage, kind of wanes with the moons. And there was a trilogy that started with this one. Started with Night of the Eye. This is the only book in the trilogy I read. It was really cool. I really enjoyed it. So these are the Darganasti. These are the Sea Elves, which was pretty cool. Yeah, so I believe it went Night of the Eye was the first book in the trilogy. Then the Medusa Plague was the second book in the trilogy. And then the Seventh Sentinel was the third book in the trilogy. But I only ever read the first one. I really should look into that because I'm interested to see, because I know I didn't enjoy this one. I mean, it was kind of cool, but I didn't enjoy it as much as other Dragonlance books, so I think that's why I didn't keep reading. Stormblade, this is the second book in the Hero series, so it goes Legend of Humor is book 1, Stormblade is book 2, and Weasel's Luck is book 3, if I remember rightly. Oh, this Second Generations. Now, this is the cover of Second Generations that I remember and that I have. So, the reason it focuses on this is because this is Kitiara's son. Now, in the Preludes, book 1, Darkness and Light, Kitiara is adventuring with Sturm Brightblade, and she manages to seduce him one night around a campfire, and ultimately she falls pregnant, and she has this son she calls Steel, and he becomes a knight of Tarkhesus, but he still has kind of that bright blade honor to him. And in the second generation, Caraman and Tika are introduced to Caramon's kind of nephew and Stern's child, and they try to guide him as best as they can. He becomes a very fascinating character in later books, where we kind of see his moral dilemma, especially when he's taken to the tomb of his father. And this is where we get to see the difference between the Knights of Solamnia and the Knights of Tarkhesus, which is just incredible if you're a Dragonlance fan. The Kaganesti. So this is the cover for the book about the Wild Elves. Now we have Dragons of Autumn Twilight. We see Tanis and Goldmoon and the Red Dragon in the background because the focus is on red dragons in that novel, where they assault the former dwarven fortress of Pax Tharkas. This was the cover that I had as a kid, but my brother had an alternate cover to the Chronicle series, which were also really, really cool. Dragons of Winter Night, Kitiara, Tasselhoff, and Kitiara's Blue Dragon there. And then we have Dragons of Spring Dawning with Raistlin, still in his red robes, I might add, because, of course, he turns to the black robes, Caramon, and the Green Dragon. Now, throughout the Chronicles, these dragons do have names. Kitiara's mount has a name, which I can't recall at the moment. Verminard's mount has a name. But the major Green Dragon player in the Chronicles trilogy, which he was actually in more prominent in Dragons of Winter Night, but that's okay, was Cyan Bloodbane. And the reason I say this is because in Dragons of Winter Night, Cyan Bloodbane is the dragon that manages to corrupt Lorak, the Elven King, who tries to use a dragon orb to kind of protect Sylvanesti, but ultimately fails. And then at the end of Dragons of Spring Dawning, Cyan Bloodbane becomes kind of an ally of Raistlin, which is pretty cool. Then we have the new Tales. Land of the Minotaurs. Really cool art there. And then we have Vander Stelt. Now, he did the art for the Daemon Saga. I have not read the Daemon Saga. I have listened to book 1 as an audiobook. But to be perfectly honest with you, I was listening to it as I was going to bed. So, you know, you hear a chapter, wake up, don't know what the fuck's going on, listen to some more, wake up, don't know what the fuck's going on. It's just something that I do. It helps me to sleep. But the art, I think, is really, really cool. And then we have contributing artists. So we have a few here. The Doom Brigade was the first book in one of the newer, well, I say newer back in the day, series which focused on Draconians who discover a clutch of eggs and actually form a Draconian civilization. They actually realize that there are male and female Draconians. The main character in the Doom Brigade, his purpose during the War of the Lance, which is basically what Chronicles follows, his Draconian squad were bridge builders. So when Lord Ariacus would have to cross a river. His Draconians would manage to kind of get that across. Fantastic story in the Dragons of Krynn anthology about him and his bridge builders. So we have a couple more there. And that is Masters of Dragonlance art. Now, for those of you not familiar with Dragonlance, please go out and find Dragonlance Chronicles. That is Autumn Twilight, Winter, Dragons of Autumn Twilight, Dragons of Winter Night, Dragons of Spring Dawning. If you are into highbrow literature fantasy, probably not your cup of tea. But if you want a fun fantasy story with a group of friends going on an adventure, and then they get split up, and then they meet back up again, and you've got a looming darkness over the land, by all means, check it out. If you don't want to read the books, but you do want to experience the adventure, you can go to DriveThruRPG and pick up the original Dungeons & Dragons Dragonlance books, Volume 1, 2, and 3, and it'll give you everything you need. But Dragonlance, by far, I mean, I know Forgotten Realms and Faerun is the most popular of the Dungeons & Dragons settings. I know Greyhawk was the first, so a lot of fans of Greyhawk there. I know Dark Sun has its fans but will never be published due to, dare I say, wokeism. I know Planescape leaves the world open to everything. I know there are a phenomenal number of fantastic worlds in Dungeons & Dragons. In my personal opinion, and this is purely nostalgic reasons, Dragonlance is one of the best, and I suggest you check it out. If not, for the stories, for the setting, for the characters. I mean, you have characters that transcend settings. You have Lord Soth, who sadly did not appear in this collection, but a Knight of Solamnia who gets corrupted and becomes a Death Knight, who then gets transported to Ravenloft, Barovia, who then gets his own domain by the Dark Powers, who then comes back into Krynn. I mean, it's just a phenomenal setting, and you are doing yourself a disservice if you don't go and at least check out Dragons of Autumn Twilight. At least just go and read the first book in Chronicles. You will not be disappointed. Hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, leave a comment. Hit the notification bell. But most importantly, stay safe. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And look at a fucking art book, people.